Anthony Scott Piatt. I'm Miguel Iturrate. And, boxing is seems to have tailed off a lot on the big, 30 boxing matches to pick from on a weekend and stuff. And that's a bit unfortunate, but
Yeah.
we got something for you this weekend, something new and something different. I'm going to let ASP explain. And we're just going to expand into new territory.
Liking where we're headed with this one. This is something that we've toyed with in the past and talked about quite a bit, folks. We're not going to hold the headline from you. It's a collaboration between Miguel's UFC pick and I've got some boxing locks. Weren't enough to do the 8 legs that we like to do, but let's hop in. Let me tell you in a preview that we are going to talk a little bit about UFC and some major changes that just happened with the upcoming lineup. We'll talk a little bit about Fury Ngannou. But let's not bury the lead. We're going to get to the where you want to put your money this week. Some fighters to watch. Keyshawn Davis and Janabek Alkumalnulli are both fighting. Both large favorites, but they're going to add to our 4-piece parlay. So those are 2 nice ones. And then the nice fight, Tszyu versus Brian Mendoza. Mendoza, look, he deserves the fight in some ways because he's been out there handling things fairly well, let's say. With that said, I'm happy for him. I think he's overmatched here. He did just come off of a nice win against Sebastian Fundora. Fundora is a very interesting fellow, very, very tall for the weight class, lanky, skinny. He was able to use that mismatch against these guys, Miguel, because how do you train for a guy like that? You can't spar, you can't prepare for that in training camp. And if he can use his length and his extremely long arms, he can keep guys on the outside. Now, to be that tall and weigh so little, you obviously don't have any padding. You don't have much muscle and fat at all around the midsection. The way to beat him, a tall, lanky tree, is to chop it down. And Mendoza was able to get on the inside fairly early, land some body blows, and we found that Fundora is not built to take body blows. He needs to keep that length and keep guys away. So I say that because I don't think that's it's a great win for Mendoza. I think it was in the right place at the right time against a fighter who was susceptible. He's lost to Larry Gomez by split decision and Jesus Alejandro Ramos just in 2021 by unanimous decision. Most of the competition that Mendoza has fought is, well, not that notable. Tszyu, on the other hand, at 23-0 with 17 knockouts from a lineage, his father, of course, out of Australia. Tim's the real deal. Carlos Ocampo, Tony Harrison, he knocked out. We know Harrison fought both the Charlos and beat one of them. Takashi Inoue was beaten as well by Tszyu. Jeff Horn, who had beat Pacquiao. Even guys like Dennis Hogan, 28-3 at the time. Steve Spark, 12-1. He's just fought a lot better competition, and in my estimation is a lot better boxer. So I think the odds with Tszyu coming in at a -750, and let's see, what does that put Brian at? I'm sorry, is about a +450. This is not a dog watch, folks. I don't see Mendoza having the success that he had against Fundora, who is a bit of a phenomenon, but had a strength and a weakness, kind of a character you would build in a video game, and to have so many points on the height, you lost out on the strength. In this situation, Mendoza, I think, is overmatched. So those are my 3 picks that I would call a lock. Now, I can tell you, when you put all those 3 together, and you bet, $10 on it, you only make $4 back. So the same would be obviously $100, only $40 back. So that's where discussing this with Miguel, our UFC guru, he's come in and thrown something on here that, with the addition of just 1 fight, has taken us to a +102. So this is great. 3 boxing locks. And Miguel, I want you to run through a little bit for the folks why you're making your pick. And you had some nice nice logic to it and nice reasoning, and run that down for the folks, and then we'll tell them this 4-leg parlay at the plus 102. We'll show that as well.
Yep, just to let the cat out of the bag. We're going to look at the main event this weekend, which is Sadiq Youssef versus Edson Barboza in the featherweight division for the UFC. So, we're going to add the main event there. The odds now, one of the reasons we've never really toyed with this is the UFC doesn't really have lock picks that materialize like a minus 2,000 that you start adding them together. So the odds for this have Youssef as a favorite at minus 178 and Barboza at plus 130, much tighter and something you'd never see in one of our normal 8-fight parlays and stuff. But because the odds are tight, it helps us close the gap and try to, double up your money kind of thing, which has been the rule that we usually, try to follow. So Youssef's 13-2. Barboza's a veteran. He's got more than 15 UFC fights. So I think he's like 29-11 or something along those lines. So the bottom line is the veteran against a younger guy. Youssef is 30. He's coming off a year layoff, and it'd be interesting to know details about the year layoff because I researched a little bit, and I didn't find that he was injured. The last time he fought, he won in 30 seconds, so it's unlikely that he got banged up in that fight. And could this be a fighter? He's 6-1 in the UFC now. Could this be a fighter that sat out a year, kind of with being strung along for the last fight of his contract?
Right.
Or if he's coming off an injury. Either way, I think a 30-year-old guy with a 6-1 UFC record should be returning motivated. Ring rust probably isn't going to be a factor, and he should be looking to make an impressive performance. A win this week, he's been off for a year, so like he's not somebody who's like at the top of the list anymore. And a win makes him 7-1 in the UFC. A loss makes him 2-2 in his last 4. It's a cavernous gap, so he should come in at the top motivated. He's got the advantage. At the books, he's got the advantage. He's got the advantage of age. Barboza can be up and down. He hasn't, he'll win some, lose some, but he hasn't had a plus record since like 2014.
Yeah.
So he's coming off a win on his previous fight, but he's 37, and Sadiq just has a lot more, top side on this one. So I would say we could bet if we add the minus 178 favorite of this fight to your parlay, what does that do?
So yeah, we add the minus 178, and to go over the earlier odds, Keyshawn Davis, we locked all money line, by the way. Keyshawn Davis at minus 2,400, the biggest lock of the night. Janabek minus 1,250. Tszyu a minus 650. I love the value there because I think Tzew's probably a minus 1,000 in reality. So the minus 650 is actually a value there. Add those with your minus 178 for Sadiq, and we come up with the plus 102 for the 4-leg parlay. We put 100 on that, trying to win $102.73, 202.73 return. Flash that on the screen there, Miguel, for them so they can see it. Yep. And so we're liking that one. I really like that pick and your reasoning behind that. Also to throw,
before you go beyond the pick, let me get a shout out there to ASP, because I know obviously that the people out there are starting to learn how you operate, and this is a great example of it, because we talked about adding this UFC fight, and one of the things that he mentioned off camera and that he looks at here is the UFC fight. That's the one that could ruin the whole parlay. That's the one you're worried about. It's good that it comes off first before the boxing. Because that way,
great point.
If the parlay's off the table early, you can use the boxing and stuff to try to, maybe, make a couple of side bets or things like that that'll get you your money back.
Yeah, and you make a great point, because that does start at 9:30. It's listed, the UFC main event, whereas Keyshawn Davis doesn't start until 10. Janabek at 11. Tszyu also listed at 11. Of course, those will change as the night goes on. The point being that Miguel makes is that the UFC happens first, and it's our hardest one. It's the minus 178. If it falls apart, then we know early. You don't sit through 3 wins and then get disappointed at the end. If it's going to lose, it's going to lose on that first leg. If that loses, you can have Keyshawn Davis, Janabek, and Tim Tszyu lined up to throw in with any other pick of your choice. That's still a viable working pieces to another parlay. If you've got a baseball game that night or football the next day that you're sure about, anything that you can find that would be in that minus 180 to minus 150 range, or go for something plus if you're darn sure of it, is going to bring you to that plus 100, to that plus money. Plus money Piatt, as they call me in one of the groups. Shout out to those guys. You know,
And
yeah.
if you're a football guy too, it's like, hey, there you got 3 fights for your parlay. Put a couple of, you're not finding that minus 180. Make it a 5 leg.
Yep.
And try to get your money back if the Barbosa fight. The thing is Barbosa has had a very, very long career, and he's a guy that is of the level that he's put up good fights against good people. So he's had great performances, but at 37, I think, those are going to be fewer and farther between.
Yep.
But, if Barbosa were to play spoiler, it might mean that Yusuf really doesn't have it the way a 6-1 guy, it's time to end that run. And we'll find out this weekend. The odds seem to think, I seem to think that Yusuf, with the information that it seems he was off for a year without an injury, and that maybe, I suspect that it maybe have to do with his contract renegotiation. So this might be the last fight on his contract, and he's going to now go into a negotiation with the UFC for a new contract. Much better to be 7-1 than 6-2.
Absolutely. Returning real quick, I like to shout guys out that I interact with, but a guy goes by the name of Dull, and his pals Kevin, Grizz, Rich, they're in a Discord called Glizzy Bangers, and we have a lot of fun in there. You can find my picks there and in a Prop Gurus Discord and a couple other places. Started a Piatt Picks Discord, but we haven't done a lot with it. I wanted to go ahead and save the name, and we'll do a lot of boxing in there. I've got some of the better boxing handicappers in there already. So if you want to join, we'll get that one built up as well. So at any rate, throwing that out there for you folks, and a shout out to those guys. What other news do we have to touch on? I know UFC. I think that's really, we've got a 2-part UFC news updates here, if you will. Yeah. 2 fights have been changed or canceled. Volkanovski's in and Oliveira's out. You were getting word on this last night as the rest of us slept. You've already been up to date. Break this down for us. That both those fights that we just talked about a couple days ago on the show are now, one's completely gone apparently. Paulo Costa's out of the picture completely.
Costa
where
had elbow surgery, and Dana White said he's looking at the fight. But
come on now,
it's
elbow surgery 3 weeks ago. It doesn't tell anybody, and is still planning to fight this weekend. I don't know if that's machismo, insanity, desperation for the payday.
I think the machismo and insanity pretty much sums up Costa. That's a good summing up of that young man. He's a little bit wild. His social media is if you're of the slant that you like to have a good time and stuff, his social media is very active and very funny. And he lets you know on there and stuff. And he put the pictures of the elbow surgery out himself on his social media.
Oh, wow.
So that's what's up there. We'll see if the Chimaev fight happens. So this is what happened here. Charles Oliveira, the former champion, getting his rematch for the title shot, is already sending bad messages. We mentioned in the last podcast, I think, that he was saying he didn't like having to go to Abu Dhabi, that he thought it was an advantage for Makhachev and things like that. And you rarely hear people who don't want to go there. You know what I mean? So it may have been weighing on him, and apparently now he got hurt or cut, and the fight's off. With the UFC title fights, UFC is for a little while now had a backup already in place, that the fighter knows if it's not this guy, it's going to be this guy. The guy who's already, getting paid to make weight and stuff. And if he doesn't fight, he gets maybe the next shot or what, that's the way they deal with the title shot so that they don't lose it. And in this case, Volkanovski, the featherweight champion, is getting his rematch early with Makhachev. And the odds got tighter. Why don't you go over what the odds were?
Yeah, so we went from Charles was a plus 255, if I remember correctly, which put Makhachev at a plus 355. I apologize, a minus 355 as the favorite for Makhachev, plus 255 for Charles. Now, Makhachev is only minus 265, and Volkanovski is slightly less of an underdog than Charles was at plus 200. So that plus 200 we talked about, their last fight was fairly close on any given minute, but maybe a 4-1 on the rounds overall. So not really that close when you look at the score, but you can make an argument that Volkanovski had moments in each of those rounds that he actually lost as well. And if his output could be turned out a bit more, then that plus 200 might not be, if you're a Volkanovski fan, that plus 200 looks fairly decent. I'm the boxing guy. I love UFC. I love MMA. And I favor Volkanovski against a lot of people in the world. I think Styles here. I think Volkanovski would be doing well to win 2 rounds instead of 1, and that would be an improvement. And he probably won't be happy with that. But I think I think he is deserved underdog here. I yield to Miguel.
No, I agree with you. I mean, look, the odds indicate that Makhachev, hats off to Makhachev too, although, he's a champion and he hasn't fought in a while either, so he's eager to get back in the ring. So he took the fight, but he's actually accepted a harder fight according to the odds. And also according to the eye test. Like I mentioned about Oliveira, I didn't like his psychology heading into this fight. I felt he'd already kind of lost it. He's saying, "Oh, this guy's got advantages in Abu Dhabi and stuff." Hey, man, find yourself a sponsor over there and try to chill out and not worry about it. There's no problem, with the place. You're not gonna, it's not. Except for that Makhachev is a Muslim and maybe he feels that he's got it too easy there. Whatever the reason is, you don't say stuff like that in public if you're in a positive mindset. So it wasn't a good sign from Oliveira. Eventually goes out. You'll have none of those types of psychological doubts coming from Volkanovski. Volkanovski is happy as a pig in mud that he's getting his rematch. He's been sort of preparing for it because they let you know that you're going to be the backup. So now he's on. This is the best case scenario for Volkanovski. So
they've still got it's not until the 21st. And as we sit, we're week of the 10th, or we're week of the 9th now. It's the 11th technically. So you've got 10 days as we record this, maybe a week or so as you're seeing it. So they've got time. Yeah,
he's probably on the plane over there now. Spend 9 days on the ground there as a champion. That's not unusual nowadays.
Plenty of time to acclimate, get his sleep systems right, and all that.
And it's a place that it's not aggravating to be at. The hotels will be decent. Everything will be good. You don't have to worry about your cornerman getting in trouble in street fights or things like that. It just doesn't happen over there. So it's Volkanovski will be there with bells on. Makhachev, the thing about Makhachev, though, is he's got an extremely safe style with very few holes.
Right.
So you got to take him out of his game and make him do something that he doesn't do, because if not, it's the Khabib factor. It's like when they impose their will, that's there. And that is going to be hard for Volkanovski to break. At the end of the day, these guys could be very near equals. The only difference maybe the 10-pound weight difference, and one's a featherweight coming up, and Makhachev is just, if you look at them in the face-off, Makhachev is a bigger man.
I think that let me pull out the crystal ball here for a minute, but I think that a lot of fight fans don't care for the ground and lounge. Okay. I don't want to call it ground and pound because they ground and lounge. That's I'm coining a new maybe someone said it before, I've never heard it, but
That's
ground
a
and
good one.
lounge, it needs to be penalized or at least not rewarded. Because I've seen plenty of fights where a guy is doing the striking, winning the fight, he gets taken down out of a 5-minute round. They're on the ground for 3 minutes. The 2 minutes he was up, he got peppered, and then they give it to the guy who took him down and didn't really do anything. To me, we need to at least emulate real world fight experience. And if you just hold me on the ground in a bar for 3 minutes and aren't putting me to sleep and you're not hitting me, you've got to get up sometime. And I'm going to hit you with a goddamn beer bottle when you do. So you better be putting me to sleep or pounding me. You better break my will. You better put me to sleep. So this idea of ground and lounge, scoring and winning the rounds and calling people champions, it's not what we want to see as fans. Most of us. And listen, my background is in wrestling. This is not me. Yes, I know I love boxing, and we talk boxing on here all the time. But listen, my background's in wrestling, but use it to do something. This idea of taking people down and you're winning because you controlled him on the ground, which means you held him where he couldn't get up, but did no real damage. I think the refs should give guy 45 seconds. If you haven't hit him hard, if you're not about to choke him out in 45 seconds to a minute, I don't want to see 3 minutes of that. I just don't want to see 3 minutes of a guy laying on another guy, Miguel. Tell me I'm an unsophisticated boxing fan and I should learn more about UFC and appreciate that so that I can at least do my homework and begin to understand it, or tell me some of that ground and lounge stuff is getting ridiculous.
No, you definitely have a point, and that more than that you have a point is that's been a line of conversation, a line of thought among more casual fans of this sport since the very beginning. So yeah, it's two men laying on each other, butt in the air, whatever you want to, whatever you want to. So it is a factor, whether you like it or not. Especially like for me, that I have a pretty good understanding of what the ground game is. There is a good chance there that you're right in certain cases that guys are playing it so safe that it's stale. But I'm just as a purist against the referee getting involved. It's similar to like if you have a football referee call timeout and call Bill Belichick over and go, look, man, you're gonna have to pass the freaking ball. This running the ball is boring.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Fair.
You know what I
But
mean?
can we, but okay. If we don't have the ref get involved, can we at least let guys know that if you're not doing anything, you're not scoring? And if you got hit 10 times and only hit him twice, and then you're on the ground for 3 minutes, you still lose the damn round.
It's still, then it falls to the judges, and yeah, I would urge more sophistication among the judges. There are certain states, I believe Kansas is one of them, where they will tell you on the loudspeaker what the results of the round you just watched were.
Okay.
And I think that dispels the first of all, I think that's an outstanding move for the fans as well, because if you have a different opinion, you're talking about it there and you're living the moment. But you also know, you can have a different opinion, but you can discuss that later. Now your guy is behind or not. I think that applies to the corner. Hey, you won that round. What if your corner man, didn't have a good angle on it and he's off?
Right.
You think you won that round, or when he tells you, we got to do something, and you've been up on certain things. Which was the fight last week that we thought the
the boxing one with gosh darn it. He was fighting Ramos and Erickson Lubin.
Emerson
Lubin.
Erickson, there you go.
And Buddy was watching that had followed my bet on that. And Erickson Lubin was a plus 1,100 underdog at the end of the fight before they announced that he was the winner.
And that's one of the reasons the sport books may have an effect on that, because they like to take bets that way. And, telling the judges scores as they go along may prevent some of that, but I don't think that the sport book should make that call. I think
Right.
Ramos
Right.
should have would have very much liked to know that this fight was a hell of a lot closer than he thought.
Because he
might.
backed off. He backed off. No, they call that open scoring, I believe, is what that's called, open scoring. And they do that besides Kansas. I know some other places they've done it as well. From a competitive standpoint, I think I would like it because if a guy knows he's down or it's tied, let's say UFC 5 rounds, it's tied 2-2, that final round matters. He's not going to coast because he thinks he's up 3-1 and maybe lose that fight. Or, the guy who's behind knows he has to get a knockout. Well, maybe I don't need a knockout. I don't want to go for it. Maybe I can still, steal one on the scorecards. I'd rather the guy know, listen, the only way you win this fight is a knock. Can you imagine the haymakers that we would see being thrown if a guy knows you cannot win this fight except with a knockout? 100% guaranteed. The judges have already told you. The action that we would see, wow.
I could see it complicating things, but I think if you take out like X factors, like the judges are cowards. They don't want to be, have the public being like, hey, what are you doing, knucklehead? You know what I mean? But that's some of that's are they going to have a bodyguard? Now, what if it's a cornerman that comes over and approaches the judge and says, you're nuts, whatever it is? That has to be controlled. It cannot fall into chaos.
Right.
It's just information. And the judges, I don't know, because they're present there. I think they try to keep a low profile, and it could be almost dangerous for them if they really don't know what they're doing.
I hadn't really thought about that. You're right. You're right. The scrutiny.
The judges are protected from and are not exposed to now. They can give you a result of gross incompetence and suffer. I'm not saying anybody should be hurt or anything like that, but to hear about it, you should be forced to listen to, the opinion of the masses when you're way off. And, we know these judges can be way off too. So it starts with a whole adjustment of the judges, but I do like that system. And I do like the idea of them giving you the scores as you go along. It just takes a mystery out of it. And by mystery, mystery could be alluring and stuff. No, but I think it's something that's good to know as you fight along. It will definitely help the corners guide their fighter better.
Well, listen, a football team knows if they're losing in the fourth quarter, and go on down the sports. You know what the score is on almost any given sport, and you play accordingly, whether it's something as gentile as golf. You still have to become more aggressive and go for that shot over the trees instead of around if you're down 2 strokes on the 18th hole or whatnot. So I think that the drama that provides would help not only with some of us more hardcore fans, but with casual fans to know it would be easier for them to watch and follow and learn the sport if they can see quote unquote a scoreboard, so but you bring up a good point. Get Adelaide Bird on the sideline making some horrible round by round calls and watch the beers start flying at her from the crowd or something. Now we've got a security problem. So
here's that's why it starts with, and few people will say this in boxing, although there is a big undercurrent of it too, is Adelaide Bird should never have been a judge ever in the first place, ever in any sport. So it starts with having judges that actually know and have some respect. And by that, I mean, there are going to be disagreements. Going back to the UFC fight for the first lightweight championship between Pat Miletich and Mikey Burnett. To this day, both men think they won that fight.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there are going to be different points of view, but as long as you're able to justify and back up what it is that you were seeing, that should be a process that the judges are put through, almost like a press conference. What was that all about? What's that 10-8 round you did? Well, I saw it this way. And if they can't do that, then I question exactly what it is that why do we protect them? They should be able to do that.
Right. Absolutely. Great stuff. I guess the last topic before we head out for this episode, touch on Fury Ngannou. The pay-per-view price just came out. I saw a bunch of headlines that said things like enormous or What was some of the headlines that they came up with? But they were indignant at the price. Enormous pay-per-view price for Tyson Fury revealed. It's not enormous. It's no more enormous than every other UFC. In fact, another article points out it's the exact price of every UFC numbered event. It's the same price or less than boxing has been. We're talking about a $79.99 and $80 price tag. A lot of our events have been $80 for quite a long time, $85 as well. Of course, if you're watching in England, go fuck yourself. I kid.
I was going to ask you. I was going to say I was going to give a shout out to one of your guys, Sonny Edwards. But I'm
Yeah.
curious as to what they're going to be popped for it in England, because
Yeah.
England traditionally has lower pay-per-view prices.
My mates over there, and I've got a lot, so I kid, but yeah, they get upset about a $20 or $25 pay-per-view card, and I'm like, boo hoo! I paid $85 twice in one weekend last week. Come on, what are you talking about here? $25. You could buy 4 or 5 of those shows for the cost of or 3 of those shows, obviously, for the cost of one of ours, depending on if you're only paying $20. You literally get 4 for 80. I mean, just come on. We're paying 80 for every single one. Now, I don't want to say that they should be paying 80. I think we should be paying, 40, and they should be paying 40 or something. Split the difference. A lot more sales here. It's always been an interesting thing when you talk pay-per-view. About 40% of your sales, dollars wise, on worldwide ones comes from outside of the US. 60% of the numbers, though, but they pay less, so only about 40% of the actual pot, the money. And I'm fine with that. I do think we pay too much in America, truthfully. So they've got a right to complain. And I don't blame them for complaining, but the visceral part of me that has to pay the $80 is kind of like, quit complaining, guys. You guys have it so great. Mm-hmm. But no, we should all fight for better prices. And truthfully, I'm not a fan of pay-per-view. I think pay-per-view is bad for the sport. I think it's bad for boxing. As a matter of fact, let me bring one thing up here. Shout out to my friend Josh Winters that just bought me this, Sugar Ray Leonard here. And that brings me back to how I got into boxing. Was watching, starting at about 7 years old, 1980 through 85. I'm watching Sugar Ray Leonard, Hector Macho, come all these guys with my grandpa, Pat. We also watched Dan Marino enter the league in 1983 when I was 10 years old. And so that's why I'm a Dolphins fan, and that's why boxing is my favorite sport. So thanks again, Winters. I really appreciate this gift. Amazing. And but I became a fan of boxing on a Saturday afternoon after my cartoons were over, and Pat and I started watching boxing. ABC's Wide World of Sports had Sugar Ray Leonard, for God's sake. We're talking free TV, middle of the day, 7-year-olds falling in love with boxing, right? Now a 7-year, how's he going to fall in love with boxing? It's pay-per-view. So we're all going over to Johnny's at 10 at night to split the $80 cost. We're all drinking and hooting and hollering, and we're having fun. Those of us that really love boxing. Our girlfriends aren't coming. They don't give, largely, by and large. Our kids aren't there. Our 7-year-olds better not be there. I want boxing on free TV in the middle of the damn day so the next generation of fans can be built. All this pay-per-view stuff is a cash grab by the likes of Floyd Mayweather, who started the egregious side of it, in my opinion, and exploited it to a level that made himself rich while ducking some of the fights that should have been made and not building new fans. And now the industry has dwindled, and we wonder where all the money is, and we wonder where the fans are. Well, I'm not demanding you restart Wide World of Sports, but you better figure out that ESPN is your friend. You better figure out the Top Rank and guys that are fighting on there, ESPN, have more exposure than guys with PBC who only do pay-per-views for Showtime, which no longer exists anymore. Okay, I'm ranting. But I'm not a fan of pay-per-view.
I understand it. In Mayweather's case, I can't really knock him. I'm not a fan of him or his style or his personality or anything like that. But I can't really knock him because if he didn't get the money he made, the promoter would have taken it and
Oh,
pocketed it. And
absolutely.
in terms of the UFC, that is what the UFC is doing, underpaying fighters and pocketing most money on the executive end.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
really is much more distasteful than a fighter, even if it's somebody who's not, you don't like making the money. So
At least,
I would
yes, he
not.
reaped the rewards of his own labor. I will agree with that. It's the same reason I don't like the idea that billionaires exist. I'm not mad at the billionaires specifically. I just don't love the system that maybe allows it or doesn't tax them at a proper rate, at least. So, right. Mayweather used the system that in the time he was at the place and the time, and he had the skills to do that.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
as we close out here, and Ngannou and Fury is another fight that really right now you know, me, I'm the last person to mention Jake Paul in any positive light, but it does seem like they generate more energy and heat for their fights than even Fury and Ngannou. They came with a large press conference in Saudi Arabia. It was very impressive, but then there really hasn't been, that much going on in the media, about the fight. We're on cruise control, waiting for it to come up. When we saw Fury's got a few pounds he's trying to lose right now, jogging or running around, whatever it is he does, dancing, because he was looking chubby and stuff. But none of that really. This fight's made already, and
Yeah.
we'll see. The odds have only gone higher and higher in Fury's favor. So, if you can catch him even at 700 now, you should grab it because it's gonna be more than that.
Yeah,
I wish it was.
we've got him listed currently. Looks like this was 7 days ago. I don't believe it's changed. I looked at several sites. Minus 1250. I seen him at minus 1350 and minus 1,000. The best you're gonna probably find Fury might be minus 900. Ngannou's around that plus 700 underdog. Um,
And on an interesting side note, I watched a video clip of, I believe it was Stephen A. Smith, who's an ESPN reporter. I'm pretty sure it was Stephen. Um, that he, before the McGregor fight, he had gone to the gym and was with Mayweather. And that in a moment when they were away from each other, he says Mayweather pulled him over and he goes, I'm going to stop him in the eighth and ninth, which is exactly what he did. And he said, wait a minute, what are you telling me? And he said, look, this guy has no boxing matches. He has no shot at really hurting me. His defense is, all time great. So he was confident in his defense. And when he had to turn it on and knock him out, it wasn't worth it to do in the first or second round. He understands drama and show and making money.
mhm.
But that's a very good comparison for this fight because Fury is not a Mike Tyson type who's just going to charge and kill you. Fury will also show the boxing skill, the dancing, and all that sort of stuff. Very comparable to Mayweather in this case, fighting a novice.
Mhm.
So Mayweather was
Yep.
able to control round and basically every minute of that fight with comfort.
Yeah.
Fury is going to be able to do this pretty
To
well.
the extent that that may be where the money is. If we could if we can hear Fury over the next couple of weeks talk about a round, you won't make it past the ninth. Maybe we start looking at building a round bet on a seventh through ninth, with the overlaps like we like to do on our round betting. Because again, there's no money in the money in the money line betting him out directly. Only looking
Are
for
you?
that
Do you get?
knockout.
Do you get a few of the options? Are they out there now? Like, what about Tyson Fury winning by decision? What are the odds for that?
Yeah, and so they're not yet on FanDuel or DK. We'll probably have to go and look at some of Bet US and a couple others. Maybe as it gets closer, I'm kind of thinking that FanDuel probably is going to want some of that money. As it gets closer, they may pop that fight up. it's not an exhibition, it's an official boxing fight. So I don't see any legalities stopping them from putting the bet out there. Some of the exhibitions they won't cover. But yeah, so as we get closer, maybe that's our path to find for this match, is where to put our money. May well be on, and kind of like you point out, it's just not very likely to be in the first, say, 3 rounds.
Oh no,
It's
I mean,
not
Tyson
Fury's
Fury is gonna
style or desire.
Tyson. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing about it is that I think what's going to be noticeable is does Ngannou look fresh coming out for round 6, round 7? Now you're into the deeper end of what boxing is. It's different round amounts and stuff, but that repetitive, now you're into the boxer's game.
Mhm.
How you doing with the 3-minute spurts? That's how you
That's
doing
right.
with did you handle it well enough that you know going into the 8th? By the 6th, 7th, and 8th round, McGregor was shot.
Yeah.
He was capable of bursts of energy and stuff. Something Ngannou may not be able to because of the size difference.
He's so
But
big, right?
he
Very
had no
interesting.
shot.
Very
He had no
interesting.
shot except for maybe catching Mayweather in the opening flurry with a surprise. And once Mayweather saw how and where and what was coming at him, it was all cruise control from there.
So I'll be
So
interested to listen, and maybe we can even discern. Hey, look, maybe we get closer and we feel like Fury wants to carry him a little bit, and
there was
maybe he's
already
not going to try and
indication of
knock
that.
him out.
If you watched the press conference in Saudi Arabia, and again, it was a big press conference. This press conference looked like, even the Hollywood red carpet seemed to pale by comparison with the broad scope of the background and what they wanted to show there. It was ostentatious, and Fury told Ngannou, "It's a show. There's a show involved in this. We're going to put on a show." The repetitiveness. There was a moment there where I think Fury told us exactly that is what he's going to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. As we say, anytime you're dealing with Fury, and especially in something that not a full exhibition, but this crossover thing, there's showmanship there. There's that WWE factor, that pro wrestling. Fury himself, he's a showman. He wants to make this. As you say, there hasn't been a whole lot of hype, but anytime Fury is on social media or in front of the camera, I don't think the promotions themselves has done a lot for this fight yet. But Fury's always animated, to say the least. And so, yeah, very interesting. Not necessarily this fight in Fury's career. It's going to make some money. It's going to help Ngannou's career, I think. His fame and whatnot. But we're on to Usyk after this. Let's, the real boxing heavyweight rankings and stuff is settled after this fight. This is a bit of a sideshow, a bit of a freak show. I'm interested to see how the rest of the sport, how MMA, how UFC, Top Rank, Matchroom, how they all view this when it comes down to it. Is it a successful event? Pay-per-view, we've talked about love-hate with that, but interesting to say the least. And I don't hate it. I mean, I don't hate it. Things were stalled in the heavyweight division. Fights weren't getting made. They made this fight, and then they made the Usyk fight. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with
Let
it.
it play out. Let them do their thing.
I'm not sure Ngannou is, this will be the peak of his career in terms of money making. I don't think the PFL is going to be able to live up to what expectations will be there. They haven't shown it. You mentioned Top Rank, and you have not Matchroom, but Queensberry, Frank Warren's promotion in they
That's
were
right,
all
with
present
Fury.
they were all present representing Tyson Fury in Saudi Arabia. No sign of the PFL, not a single presence there.
Oh,
So,
wow.
they don't have an obvious opponent. They actually came out and made a statement that they were going to surprise everybody with the opponent. And, then he signs to fight Tyson Fury, and they have not, I guess it was Tyson Fury they were referring to, but they're not involved in the fight. So,
All right.
They have not announced an opponent for Ngannou in MMA. They have really, unless they could somehow lure Fury beats Ngannou and then they want to do it again in MMA. That would be an ace in the hole for the PFL and maybe, carry on the circus of big money for them. But if Ngannou has to fall back and fight the fighters on that roster, then this is going to be by far his biggest blip, on the radar kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll see what we will get out of MMA promotions. But the UFC's overwhelming lead is getting bigger still.
It is.
That's what's amazing. Bellator had their 300 show last weekend, and their former announcer Jimmy Smith labeled it like a funeral.
Oh.
Just felt like a funeral, and it may very well be their last show. They may string out one or two more till the end of the year, but they may be done. And then One FC was scheduled to do 2 shows in the States, just 2, in 2023, and they delivered one, and there's no sign of the other show. So,
hey, let's mention though, while we're at it, let's mention the littler guy who's coming up, one championship. They actually did deliver some shows in America for the first time this year.
No, One Championship is the one that failed to do the second show.
Oh, they didn't bring the second one. My bad. I was thinking PFL and Bellator.
Yeah,
Bellator is not doing.
One is the third one. One is
That's right.
in Asia,
that's right.
So, and they're backed by big money. So there's the expectation that, they could compete for the UFC. But at this point, if they're going to announce 2 shows or plan 2 shows and then do one in the States and take steps like that, then you're looking at something that they may overtake UFC, but it's not going to be in my lifetime.
Right.
So like I said, the UFC's margin of victory as they become a monopoly, is just getting bigger. And that's, your first true sign of a monopoly. If you're making money, competition should arise and take some of that money. It's just naturally the way business is supposed to work. And they consistently, eliminate competition. So
they hoover it all up.
the UFC is, I think, okay with the path Ngannou and Tyson Fury is taking, because I don't think that they have any threat from, from the PFL, and what they're going to do with Ngannou is going to close the gap. Dana White,
just a random thought. Isn't PFL the one that signed Clarissa Shields? Is she with PFL too?
Yeah.
So maybe they do a boxers in PFL night with Clarissa on the card, Fury fighting Ngannou, whoever the hell else they can find. I mean, maybe
that would be a gimmick, that would be a gimmick. What do you do for an encore? The UFC doesn't care about that. Let me tell you what the UFC is planning now, or what that company is planning now. Okay. I don't know if you saw this, but it was big on social media and it made the rounds of news and things that Las Vegas has a place called the Sphere now. It's a new arena. And apparently they got U2, which is, a major rock act.
For a residency,
So U2 did the first show there. And it's the kind of thing where you have an immersive 24, round, 360 rather, screen around you and stuff. And they're able to just visualize and stuff.
Yeah. And inside and out, by the way, if you've seen the pictures.
Yeah. So
the projections are visible outside as well. It's crazy.
So this is the open question. Will we see WrestleMania there or a major UFC there first? Because either one, it's the same company delivering that. And that's the level of worry that they're going to put on that show and take the show aspect to a new level and, move on from there. Meanwhile, like I said, the other, every other company seems to be sputtering.
That's right. It's interesting situation, and no real chance of catching up that you or I can see. That's for sure. So
no, the gap one came to the United States this year. It's like, okay, they canceled the second show or haven't done the second show yet, delayed it maybe and stuff. Then there was news about. Here's the other interesting aspect of one, and I'm just going to give a superficial comparison, but I live in Latin America. I can tell you this: if I go to a local bank and apply for a credit card or a loan of any type, they can apply interest to me that would be illegal in the United States. The United States consumer has protections, but they don't. So what do the one contracts that they execute in Asia where the laws are completely different? How do they obligate the fighters? What do they have? If the UFC is a monopoly and controls the fighters' every move, how does the one actually execute that? Because they have to be executing it
Yeah.
at that level to be as big as they are already.
I see.
And will
Wow. Yeah.
that be considered a problem in this country? I think it
Right.
will be considered a problem in this country because I think that what you'll find is, and there was a contract that got leaked out from one at some point over there, and they have some clauses there that yeah, they tie you up and keep you there and make you go back to one, just like the UFC does. But everything executes differently, and like I said, will their contracts be usable in this country? Like they tried it once at the show. Now the boxing commission may have actually looked at them and said, "Hey, this part here, this part here." They're already multi-fight deals, and they're honoring most of them all overseas anyway. But that's a real concern when they say they're coming to the States and stuff. Oh yeah, well you may actually have to change business practices to do business.
Yeah. That's a whole, boy, that's a lot of hurdles to making an even playing field
Yeah.
in that
It's like
situation. Wow.
if you're a bank in Latin America and you're like, well, we're going to open an office in the States. Woo, we're going to have more customers, charge them 40% interest. Whoa, you can't charge 40% interest in the States on, credit cards and things like that. So now the guy's like, hey, I'm not going to make the money. It really affects the business model. So
Yeah.
who know, and I suspect that because we're in the States and we have some protections, that what the UFC has done will eventually be found to be a monopoly. And I suspect that one will have laws that allow that a lot more than they do in the States. So the fact they got away with it here in the States, one's going to be in the radar faster than the UFC got. And, then they can spend all their money on lawyers.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. They did their show in Vegas, so the Sphere, is an interesting that it's there now. We'll
I
see if
saw
we ever
Dana
see them
talking
there.
about the Sphere. He wants it.
Yeah,
He
he
wants it,
wants
and
it.
he's competitive. But I think the logical choice there is that WrestleMania should be there. WrestleMania is now with the new company. The UFC at one point when they had the November shows and George St. Pierre defended every November, and then you had time frames. You had the Super Bowl show, you had the July show with that came with the summer conference of fighters and things like that. And but they really don't have one show that rises above them all. They're all pretty high level, but WrestleMania does rise above them all. Even though the WWE has a roster of Survivor Series and things like that, SummerSlam, big names that have pedigree for years and years, they will always tell you WrestleMania is the Super Bowl.
That's it. It is.
So it'll be interesting if Dana can get in there in the competitive nature of what the new company is and do a UFC in the Sphere. Vegas is his hometown. Do a UFC in the Sphere before the wrestlers grab it, because the wrestlers show and things is further advanced.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun, kind of interesting to see what develops there. And then, honestly, just the Sphere itself. What other sports? Can it do a soccer? Can it do hockey? What else can be in there? And over the next 10 years, what are we going to see? It's pretty interesting. Of course, I saw some rain the other day, made the whole thing go on the fritz. So let's see what the longevity of it is and the repair costs over a decade as well. Upon the first storm.
I think Dana said that it was owned by Madison Square Garden Corporation.
Okay.
And so they've got money for repairs, I think.
Right,
I think they'll be okay. And they supposedly the first show with U2, and you're talking about veteran company and veteran band, everything like that. But it all went off without a hitch, and they tried everything that they wanted to try and got it done and stuff. And if Dana was impressed and Dana wants to do a show there, Dana usually gets what he wants to do there.
That's right.
Maybe when the PFL goes down and Ngannou's back in the UFC, we can leave it at that.
Oh man, Miguel, fun stuff. I love putting this bet together with you. Going back to the beginning of the show, the 4-leg parlay. I think this is a fun one. We're not reaching overreaching or anything. These boxings are the 3 are locks, and to get our juice out of that UFC pick, that makes a lot of sense, and that it comes first on the parlay so that we can still use that other boxing for a second winner or a rebound if Sadiq doesn't pull this off for us like we expect. So anyway, just touching back on that, I think it's going to be a fun little weekend. We've made something out of it.
And
Just not.
There was one other item I had made some notes because I want to talk about Tszyu.
Oh, Tim,
And,
yeah.
you know, he's at 22-0, 23-0 now in that neighborhood and stuff. And
23.
his father's a Hall of Famer. You
Yeah.
know, 35-2, a great boxer in his day, one of the most feared guys out there. And a Hall of Famer. And you mentioned Mayweather, and you had Roger Mayweather there, his dad, and the first generation of boxers there, his uncle and his his dad.
I was gonna say his uncle as well. Yeah.
Floyd, surpassed them. And then you've got the case of Julio Cesar Chavez and Chavez Jr., where the junior
regressed.
Didn't live up to expectations and stuff. Tszyu is getting to the point where you're going to have to ask the question of who's better, him or his dad.
Him or his dad.
His dad is was an all-time great, really, or at least for that generation was one of the best that we had.
Yep.
So it becomes interesting to watch guys like that because he's on the path maybe to equal or get there, and he's trying. He's got his backings, and they've been bringing him along real well. So now the question starts to get there. Do you make it? Do you make it out? There are a lot of these examples. I love it in boxing. You can find guys like Floyd that surpassed the previous generation, and maybe guys like Chavez who didn't. Another one that comes to mind that I think it's going to be tough, but early on it looked good is Chris Eubank, because
Chris Eubank,
his dad is another legendary fighter.
Another one out right now would be Campbell Hatton, Ricky Hatton's son.
And talk about another tall order to meet. Ricky Hatton put the loss on Costa Tszyu's record.
Right.
It's like good luck. Good luck, and I want you to reach your father's heights and surpass them, because that's great viewing for everybody and great for boxing. But a lot of the guys don't make it. So Tszyu becomes very interesting because he seems to be on the path where, we'll see if he falls off and doesn't make it, but he's getting into the neighborhood, and it's exciting to see. So just another little aspect of why a minus 750 favorite is still worth watching the fight and getting to know it, because he could be a main event guy in a few years.
Yeah, I was just looking at something here. Campbell Hatton and Tszyu, I don't think are likely to fight. I just had that thought,
Okay.
The dads fought, and sometimes that happens where, the sons fight each other and stuff. I believe Tszyu fights at a substantially higher weight class than Campbell. But an interesting concept there, and neat to see them both doing well. Fury, I'll throw that out there. Fury's also a legacy fighter, if you will, but his dad wasn't famous, and it was quite easy to overcome his father's record and fame in boxing. But nonetheless, he probably caught the bug from his father as well. So Campbell Hatton, a lot of these guys, Tszyu, have potential to equal or exceed their father. And going back, with Chavez, I think that he just, some guys need to grow up in the hard streets, struggling, fighting for everything they get, to have that determination to go far in boxing, to go deep in those rounds where you're, it's just easier to give up instead of keep fighting. And maybe Chavez just grew up with a bit of a silver spoon and didn't have that. But I never felt the fire from him in his personality or in his fighting style. So
Eubank talks the talk, and he's a good boxer, but his father's just one of those guys that had such memorable fights that it's up in the air as to whether he'll match another.
Now, wasn't Eubank going to fight
Nigel Benn's son? And that
Nigel Benn's son, and that was a father and father rematch.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And that if it hasn't materialized, should materialize at some point. The guys
I think it was because Conor Benn popped for steroids.
Okay. All right.
And
And that's an
but then he
interesting.
got cleared and they let him fight again. So it's back to being a possibility, at least from what I understand. But yeah, that would be one of those the fathers fought and now the sons
Yeah,
fight.
and not only did the fathers fight, go back and watch those fights. Nigel Benn versus Chris Eubank. Those are historic, fights where the world was watching the middleweight division at that point. And it's funny because both men are so different. Nigel Benn, I believe, has left England and lives in a farm in Australia, just removed. And like his son is going through his boxing career. Yeah, maybe they talk a little bit about it, but other people are bringing him up. Whereas Chris Eubank was integral in bringing his son along in the boxing,
Right.
including taking the spotlight many times from his son. Chris
Yeah.
Eubank is a bird of a different feather. Even in his old age, he still likes to be the center of attention. Very different men, and the rematch between Eubank, the juniors, and Eubank and Ben, uh, because of that storyline, to me is one I want to see. I'm dying to see it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, fun stuff. Fun stuff. There is some good stuff coming up November and October with boxing. We prefaced that in our last episode. So keep checking back with us and we'll be dropping you things. Please spread the word, subscribe, and all that good stuff. We like bringing this to you, and boxing and UFC. We don't miss a lot. We're going to bring you most of the good fights and send you in the right direction. And we appreciate you, those of you that follow us and tail our bets and come along with us. So we'll try and keep making you that money.